There we go. Okay, so, and I'm here with Julie Hand, the Assistant Director with the Division of Developmental Disabilities. And so this was an item that we had highlighted on our family support, keeping families connected, quality action plan. And so the focus of today is how we can use person-centered tools, person-centered thinking, kind of the life course, to develop person-centered goals. And so the focus of this training is intending on using that thinking and framework to frame how we're writing goals within the focus system. The intent of this training is not to focus on the technical aspects of goals within the focus system. This is not, so to speak, a kind of a technical assistance webinar in terms of operating the focus system, but more of how we can be doing a good job of truly getting to know an individual and writing goals to support them across their lifespan, not just looking at goods and services that we can provide today. So that just wanted to kind of provide that highlight. If you have questions along the way, you can certainly type them into the chat box, or you can unmute your line and announce them to everybody. We will have somebody monitoring the chat box if there's any questions, but feel free to ask questions along the way. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Julie Hand.
Okay. Hi, everyone. As Jay said, this is Julie Hand, and I'm excited to be presenting today, even though I can't see anyone. This is a fun topic for me to talk about, and just to share a little bit about myself, I have been certified as a person-centered thinking trainer since 2008, and so have a lot of practice with talking about person-centered thinking and how it relates to ISP planning and writing goals. And I've been leading DDD's membership in the Supporting Families Community of Practice, which is founded on the principles of Charting the Life course for the past few years. So some of you I haven't met yet, and some of you I've met a few times, but we're hoping that this will be a bit of an interactive webinar. And so as you have questions, or if there are things that you're curious about or want me to explain again for whatever reason, like Jay said, put a question in the chat pod, or unmute your line. And we certainly, you don't have to hold your questions till the end by any means. I think it would probably be easier if you have a question on something specific to talk about it in the moment rather than trying to kind of retrace our steps and go back. So given that, so the core belief this is the core belief from the Supporting Families Community of Practice, that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, play, and pursue their life aspirations in the community. And so we don't, this is a very specific statement, because we don't say all people with disabilities, but all people. And we really want to drive home that people with disabilities are part of the all, so we don't, that's why it's not singled out as a disability specific statement. And so that's kind of the core belief and one of the foundational principles. In addition to ISP planning, person-centered planning is really to help people get better lives, not just better plans. And, you know, sometimes here at the state level, we are focused on the paper because that's what we have to base our opinions on. That's what we have to look at. We're not out visiting with people every day like each of you are. So I always, as a state staff, sort of switch my hats a little bit from PCT trainer to state staff, and saying that while it really ultimately is about the good life, we do want to see that that's reflected in the ISP, and to the extent possible, and that and that's why we're here today, so we can make sure that everyone has a good understanding of how to gather the information and meaningfully incorporate that into the ISP plan, so the things that you're probably doing but not writing down are better captured And so we can prove to our federal partners how we're helping people reach those outcomes and those good lives. So, oh, pause.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it seems like we have maybe a few people who are struggling accessing the presentation.
Okay.
I'll get it sent out to them. But
Okay. So if you can't see the presentation, we are emailing it out. So please announce yourselves.
Server connectivity issues. Well, I would like to say that's an unusual occurrence with our webinars, but we do tend to have pockets of that happen. So within a minute or so, you should have the presentation, but I'll just hold off until that gets sent out and you can get it open and in front of you.
So again, please announce whether you unmute your line or through the chat if you're having issues with the presentation and viewing the presentation.
I'm going to continue. It's been emailed, and I will do my best to remember to announce which number slide I'm at, which number slide I'm on, or what the content of the slide is. So right now I'm about to talk about slide number 4, which is beginning with the end in mind. And so always when we're planning, we want to make sure that there is a specific purpose for what we're trying to achieve. And we want to think about what is the end result, what is the impact, what are we trying to accomplish, and how will we know if we're making adequate progress, which is probably an entirely separate webinar all in itself, is that whole idea of goal attainment. How do you know if you're making progress, and who measures that and by what standards? And then, of course, you're all familiar with the idea of the action steps and the things that lead to that desired outcome. So what actions will we take to reach what we want to do? And for purposes of I got it. So I'm going to go back a second.
There we go.
Okay, so I was about to say, with what family support coordinators are typically, your purpose for planning is often the initial ISP or the annual ISP, or maybe changes to the plan throughout that 12-month period. But again, other than just sort of the requirement piece, it's really important to think about what are you trying to achieve. You know, if it's that initial ISP, probably you're doing that initial meeting with the family and the participant, and you are working to get to know them, what it is, what their needs are, what their strengths are. And so that initial plan is really just to kind of just what I said. I'm going to keep using the word initial probably, but you just want to get that first step and that first bite into helping the family better support that person and have better outcomes for the entire family, but the participant specifically. If it's an annual, it's that check-in, it's how are we doing, what progress has been made, and how do we move forward from here. So the idea of the trajectory is really goes back to that importance of establishing a vision, which can guide that whole purpose of planning. And so one of the things I want to point out about the trajectory is that it could be, you know, planning for your vision for a good life, as it says on this slide, which, and I'm on slide 5 now. I'm probably going to struggle with remembering to say the number, but I'm trying. So establishing that vision might be for 10 or 20 years from now, or it might be for next week. And I would guess, based on my conversations with families and what I've heard from family support coordinators in the past, is that often families are so overwhelmed that they can't necessarily tell you what their vision is. And so my advice in that situation would be start small, and often it's easier for families or people to tell you what they don't want than what they do want. So anywhere you can start with this conversation is fine. There's no specific way it needs to be completed. And in fact, if you can just keep in mind the vision for a good life and what I don't want, I like this particular format that I have up on the slide because it does acknowledge some of those past life experiences as well as what needs to happen in the future. And because I'm more familiar with choices, my experience is more grounded in, sometimes there's an assumption in the service world by professionals to assume that we're starting at ground zero with someone when they begin services, and we don't always take the time to learn about those past life experiences and what the person has done, how the family impacts, what has impacted the family and the person leading up to that date and time. So driving home that whole idea, and really once you have some practice with this trajectory, you don't have to have this paper in front of you. I think if you walk away with one thing today, I hope it's the understanding that, oh, yes? Yeah. Okay. So I hope you walk away with the understanding that person-centered planning isn't about the form or the paper you take in. If you can get familiar with just the information you're trying to gather and have that sort of as a framework in your mind, you can have the same conversations, write it all on a notebook piece of paper, and if you really want to, you can sift it out in this format or some of the other formats that I'll be talking about throughout the training. But it's really the conversation and the time you take to get to know someone. So the other thing I want to talk about is, so when we talk about those life experiences, it really gives that insight. And I want you to think about how you get to know the person and their family during that initial contact and throughout the development of the ISP, throughout the plan year and those quarterly check-ins. When you take the time to get to know who a person is, that happens over a course of time. It doesn't all happen in one meeting. And so, and it also takes time for families and I mean, for anyone, for people, for the all, to gain some trust, because they're probably not, I would imagine they're not like letting you into their whole life the first time they sit down with you. And so they're probably expressing those immediate needs that they have, which often would result in, I need this good or I need this service. But as you get to know that family and that participant, the more you will learn about the information they need and the connectivity they need, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Okay, moving on to the next slide. I think. There we go. Okay, so I'm on slide 6, and this is just a little bit of a reminder of the life experiences and the transitions that we all experience throughout life. So the little circle icons you'll see, those are representative of the various life stages, moving from infancy on the left, in the lower left, to aging in sort of that upper right, right-hand side of the arrow. and thinking about the life experiences that people without disabilities have throughout those different life stages, and how those contribute to how we behave in our jobs, how we behave in our relationships, the friends we make, the relationships we have, making mistakes, learning to say no, babysitting as a lot of people I'm sure had an early summer job, whether it was for their grandmother mowing the lawn or actually, driving a tractor, whatever that might be, because we live in South Dakota and people drive a lot of tractors. That's my reference point. That's my life experience. So I just wanted to drive that home. And so because many of you, all of you, are working with people who are anywhere on this throughout these life stages, thinking about the life experiences they've already had, and maybe the ones that they haven't had yet, that would help them get to where they want to go. Okay, moving on to slide 7. I'm going to take a sip of water. So how do we learn about what's important to people? This is really something that even over the last few years as a trainer and within our trainer group, we've started to think about differently. Because when I first went to Person-Centered Thinking Trainer, the whole idea of important to and important for, and I'm probably stealing my thunder for like a slide that's 5 slides from now, but that's okay. It was introduced as a person-centered thinking tool. And I'm guessing that a lot of you who have gone to a 2-day training probably walked away with that same understanding. And we really realized in recent years that it is a foundational skill to be able to sort that information. And gathering the information, though, starts with these discovery tools that are listed on the slide. So 2-minute drill, relationship map, routines and rituals, good day, bad day, communication chart, and reputations. So just asking someone what's important to them typically results in pretty superficial information. So you'll get responses like, my family is important to me. My pet is important to me. My name, choose your personal favorite belonging. My wedding ring is important to me. But what is it about what that ring represents? Or are there people in the family that they're closer to? Or what does that mean? How often do they want to be in contact with them? So it means something different to every person. And so by doing these discovery tools, you get to a deeper level of learning about the person versus just, oh, their family is important to them, and making the broad assumption that everyone in their family they're close to and they want to see or talk to or be with, which I think we probably all know from our own family experiences is probably not the case. So, and like I said, this happens over multiple conversations and over time as you get to know people. I don't think I've ever met anyone that I just, opened the floodgates and they knew everything about me after our first interaction. So I'll go through each of these discovery tools I will really attempt to be brief with them. But I just want to take the opportunity to say that if you haven't attended a person-centered thinking training in a while, the curriculum has been updated in the last couple years. And while in general it provides the same information, I would say some of the different perspectives that we share throughout the 2-day training and the different examples that we work through with some of these tools specifically have evolved. And I've done the training a lot of times and I've watched the training a lot of times, and each time I still walk away with something new and different. And so if after today's session you to attend one, I'm confident that you would walk away with some new ideas or some new thoughts on how you could use this in your day-to-day. Okay, moving on to the next. So again, the power of discovery, getting to know people in a meaningful way. And this has a few examples of questions that you can ask. So if given unlimited power, authority, money, what does your perfect day or week look like? And while If you asked me that, some of my answers would probably not be super realistic, but you know, again, asking why and what about that really helps you understand what the person means when they say, "Oh wow, I would just like watch, you know, I would just like sleep in," because that's probably what I would say. I would say I would sleep and I would probably read a lot, and knowing that that's not a way that I could live my life on day to day. But what does that say, and what does that reflect about what's important to me? And we also, I want to point out the like and admire. And this is something that is really powerful, because when we start thinking about how is a person smart and what do they contribute and what do we like about that person, it really reframes the entire conversation. And again, my frame of reference is typically from the choices side, where there's a large team convening, and I know that that's not the case in family support necessarily, but it would be pretty intimidating to sit in a room, whether it's my living room or a conference room, full of people who are there to sort of assess and discuss what I need for the next 12 months. And so starting with a conversation about what we like and admire about the person can be really powerful, and just, you know, set the meeting on a whole other course. Okay, moving on to slide 9. So the 2-minute drill is really just what it sounds like. It quickly gives supporters the most pertinent information, so they can help the person be happy, content, satisfied, which is important too. Healthy, safe, valued by others, which is important for, and maintain a good balance between the two. And the example I often use in this one is, I think about when I leave my kids with a babysitter, as I rush out the door, well, and they don't really cling to my leg anymore, which is nice. In a way, it's nice, but you know, what do I need that person to know while I'm gone for a few hours, so everyone stays alive and they have a relatively good time. So that's the best way I relate that to myself and how I usually explain it to others. I'm going to pause for just a minute in case there are any questions or thoughts people are having. Okay, I'm going to move along. Okay, so next is the relationship map, and I'm sure that this looks familiar to most, if not all of you. So I'm not sure, oh, you can't see my mouse because I'm not the actual presenter. So on the top quadrant, you have family. Bottom quadrant, you have friends. As you're looking at this, on the right, you have people whose job it is to support me at home and other places. And on the left, you have people who support me at work or school. So imagine your own name in the middle circle. And as you fill out the relationship map, you would start, well, you could really start anywhere, but you're going to write down the people who are closest to you, if it's your relationship map, or the person you're working with to plan. So you would put their name in the middle and then start asking them, who do you spend time with? Who do you really get along with? Who maybe rubs you the wrong way? And so the closer the emotional connection, the closer those names will go to your name or the person's name. And so the relationship map is not about blood relationship. It's really about emotional closeness. And so you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot by using the relationship map to figure out who do they spend time with. And maybe, you know, that conversation can expand pretty easily into what do you like to do together? And then that natural flow of the conversation leads to a lot of information, versus just asking who is in your immediate family, or, you know, who are you related to? So friends and family are typically those are pretty obvious categories that people can fall into. But I want to take just a second to explain the people whose job it is to support me at home and other places. So I would put my dentist, my hairstylist. These are people I pay, and it is their job to support me in some way. So that's who would go on the right side. And people who support me at work or school, I would consider that to be my coworkers. Well, they're paid to be here, but they're being paid because they have a job, not because of me, because their presence exists because of me. And so I would put Jays and Kara and Daryl, and I would, there are people that I would put on that relationship map at varying degrees of closeness, emotional closeness, who they just support me because we work together and because of that natural relationship and kinship. So that's a relationship map in a nutshell. You can also, this also leads to another tool that we won't talk so much about today, but the matching tool that you're probably familiar with, where you really look at those skills and interests and personality characteristics. If you really think about who's close to the person and what do those people all have in common, if there's anything they have in common, how can you then use that information to help with success in finding providers, respite providers or companion care providers. Okay. So routines and rituals. We all have routines and rituals, and this has a lot. You can get a lot of information by asking someone, not necessarily what their schedule is, but what their routine is at any of these different intervals. So we typically all have a certain set of activities we do in the morning to get ready before we leave the house, before we go to bed, when we come home from work. My husband used to tease me, and he doesn't so much anymore, but I always change clothes when I get home from work. So is there something that you have to do to like unwind from the day? And whether that's maybe transitioning to work or away from work or whatever other environments are pertinent to the person. Birthday and holiday, those are really big ones. People like to celebrate in a lot of different ways. And often if there's something missing, that can result in a chain reaction if supporters don't know that. And often it seems like there's something that's missing and supporters don't even know it's missing. And in family support, I would imagine that, again, is a little bit different than in choices where people are surrounded by a team of paid supporters. In family support, they're in the family home, and so hopefully those things don't get missed. But if there's a crisis and someone is in the hospital, what still has to happen? Or if they have to be somewhere different for their birthday, what do they still need to have happen for that to feel like it's their birthday? And so this is just a list of all the different kinds of routines and rituals that we typically have in our lives. Okay. Good day, bad day. This was a tricky one to think about because the routines and rituals and good day, bad day are both in the 2-day person-centered thinking training. They're exercises. And so you get some hands-on application and practice on yourself. And so it was tricky to think about how to adequately explain how to best learn from people using this good day, bad day framework. But what I came up with is there are some questions that you can ask that can, again, get to that deeper level of information from people. So what do you look forward to doing? What do you maybe procrastinate or not look forward to? What threw your day off? Were there bad moments? And so we always want to make sure when you're asking about those bad day moments, and I might be able to, I don't have them on this slide, I just realized, but you always want to follow that up with questions like, is there something someone did to help that go better and to make your day get better? Because we want to make sure that people are having more good days than bad days. And if that's not the case, what can we do to support you? And it's not about fixing it. So if I sleep in, I don't want someone to come to my house and knock on my door at my usual wake up time to make sure I'm out of bed. If I oversleep and I'm late to work, what that looks like for me is, please just don't call attention to it as I walk through the door, and maybe don't bombard me for a little while once I get in, because I'm probably already frustrated with something, with oversleeping or whatever else made me late in the morning. And that helps kind of reset my day. So it doesn't take a lot. Sometimes it's what shouldn't we do in response. So just, and I can find those questions that lead to good support and make sure those get sent out to you too. I'm going to make a note to myself real quick here. Okay. So the communication chart is really to gather information about what we know or what we guess a person is telling us with their words or with their behavior. It's a pretty common belief that the communication chart should or could only be used when people don't use words to communicate, but that's really not the case. We all have nonverbal communication. That means something. Sometimes it means just that we're cold, but sometimes, it means something else. And we all say things or maybe have little phrases or tells that only the people who really know us well would catch on to. One example I can think of with that, well, okay, before I get into my example, so you want to, in the second column, you'll notice there's a number 1 listed there, and that is the observable action. That's what people see, hear, feel. And so when you're filling out a communication chart, that's the column you want to start with. What is the person doing? And then you want to go to that what's happening, which is the first column on the table, but it's labeled number 2 in the slide. You want to pay attention to the environment, what's just happened, were there any triggers for the person? And the thing I want to point out with this particular section, with what's happening, is that it rarely has anything to do with the person. So what does have something to do with the person, though, is the third column, which is labeled number 3, and that's what we think it means. And this is labeled what we think it means because until we ask the person, we don't really know. And we might ask a person and they don't really know either. So at this point, we're just making a guess, and the best you can do sometimes is to continue to observe and hone in on that particular action that the person is doing. We're guessing what those emotions and feelings are. And then the last column is what we should do or say in response, or what we should not do or say in response. There are certain things that, might just set the person off even more. So we want to make sure we avoid that. And it's just as important for people to know what not to do as it is for them to know what to do. So to give a quick example, I supported a woman a long time ago who so she would go to, let's say, bingo, or she would go somewhere with her friends, with the other people she lived with, and I would ask her the next time I saw her, oh, well, how was bingo? And she would say, oh, it was all right. And I took that to mean, oh, okay, she's okay with that. And so I would not linger on it or ask any more questions. And after a few times of that, and watching her facial expressions a little more closely, I started to wonder if maybe it's all right actually meant no, that it's all right. I am not excited about it. I don't really want to do it again. And so I asked her one day, so what, would you go again? And she said, no, I wouldn't. And so, that can just be interpreted, just those 2 words, or 3 words, I guess, can be interpreted really differently. And so if we don't pay close attention, we're missing that. And so we could be offering to take her to bingo week after week, and maybe she goes because it's something to do, but it's really not her thing, and possibly contributing to more bad days than good days. Okay, moving along to reputation. So there are some key components, and this is also an exercise in the 2-day person-centered thinking training, where you think about, and again, this is where you practice on yourself during the training, and you think about 3 mild negatives. And I'm using an example on this slide of a trainer from Colorado because I couldn't think of a great one for myself, but or maybe I just didn't want everyone to know all my secrets, but either way. So, you know, we all have reputations, and there are people that we work with who we know before we really have met them. And so because we want people with disabilities to be valued, reframing that reputation is a pretty important aspect of providing good support. So we want to think about any of those negative reputations that people have. And I list some examples here: messy, arrogant, stubborn. And thinking about if and when those traits might ever be a positive. And so the example I use here is a person who has a reputation of being arrogant. You know, that might be a positive because they're a very confident person. Then the next question or the next consideration is really understanding what those traits represent about what's important to the person. So in this example, that means he has high standards for himself and for others. And then when that arrogance gets in the way and it really is a negative, what's the best way to support that person? You know, is it to tell the person to back off? Is it to leave them alone for a little while? You know, thinking about what does support look like instead of just saying, oh, he's so arrogant, or, you know, there's no talking to this person. We really have to reframe that. Okay, so some of a few tips on discovering what to avoid is questions that are close-ended. So you want to try to avoid those yes or no questions. The questions that have built-in answers. An example I can think of would be like, oh, so pancakes is your favorite breakfast, right? Because a lot of times people are pretty equipped and practiced to tell us what they think we want to hear. And it really doesn't require them to elaborate at all. And questions where people who are eager to please simply look to you for the answer. So again, here we are back at important 2 and important 4 of the core concept. So important 2 and important 4 is really a compilation of what's learned through the process of discovery. And so all of these discovery tools that I've talked about, you don't have to complete them all to be able to start learning about what's important to and important for a person. They don't have to be, it's not a comprehensive set, and if you don't use them all, you shouldn't use any. You can pick and choose based on the situation, based on your purpose for planning. So there's a lot of flexibility, but you can use them as an entire sort of set of skills to learn about the person. I already talked about, you know, taking the time over a period of time and listening to the person and the people who know them best. And what's important too is unique to each person. Okay, so I'm gonna breeze through this a little bit. Again, just to specify, important too is by their own definition, what is a person? It includes only what a person says, either with their words or their behavior. And if their behavior and their words are in conflict, always listen to the behavior. My husband will, so if I ask my husband to do something and I say, you know, it's really important to me that, wow, we get our yard cleaned up. And he says, yeah, that sounds good. But he continues to watch ESPN. Yeah, it's probably not as important to him as it is to me, or as important as he says in that moment anyway. So always pay attention to the behavior and ask why. Important 4, those issues of health, that's the prevention, the treatment of illness, the promotion of wellness, issues of safety in their environment, their physical and emotional well-being, freedom from fear. And another big part of important 4 is helping that person to be valued and to be a contributing member of their community. We're all in the disability field, and we're all aware that sometimes our communities can look to people with disabilities as, well, we have to help them. And it sort of becomes this culture and this attitude of charity. And we don't want people with disabilities and the people you're supporting to be only seen as takers. You really want to help that person contribute back so they're also seen as a giver back to their community. Okay, so those two are connected and they influence one another. And no one does anything that's important for them willingly unless some part of it is also important to them. That balance is always changing, and there are always trade-offs between among the things that are important to and between what's important to and important for. So I really love pizza, but that doesn't mean I can eat it for every meal, because if I want to pay any attention to what's important for me, I need to find some balance in that. There was another thing I was going to say about this. Just give me 1 second. Oh, another example that I often use with this is for people for people who have smoked or currently smoke, or ex-smokers particularly. You can't say, well, I stopped. Well, you could say, but I'm going to just throw a little wrench in there. You can't say, well, I stopped smoking because it's not healthy, right? But even while you were smoking, you probably knew it wasn't healthy. But until something in your life is important to you enough that it makes you go, oh, okay, now I need to be around for my kids, my grandkids. Something in your life, something in that life has probably changed. And now it's connected to something that's important to you. And that's what gets people motivated to make that change and pay better attention to that. So again, there are trade-offs. This just has a couple of examples. You know, some people like to live in a particular place and they're willing to commute, even though it might take them a while to get to work, but they really like the community where they live. So this is an example of important to and important for as compiled through that discovery process. So friends, looking nice, fitting in, doing things on her own, and a job. And then important for, you'll see, is the health, the safety. So it's about her diabetes. It's about budgeting money. It's you know, having a smartphone so she knows how to get around town, to have some cooking apps, so she can do things independently. But you see how they're connected to, the smartphone is really related to doing things on my own. Let's see here. I included this slide that's titled Dignity of Risk and Mistakes, slide 23, because a lot of people, I mean, the information in these clouds is really not unusual, and it's pretty universal to all people. Again, friends, family, having money, a job I like, a home, faith. And generally, people don't want to be poor or lonely or segregated or not have choice or no meaning in their life. But we have to also recognize that people will make mistakes. If you think back to that life experience slide that I had up earlier, making mistakes is part of learning and part of life. And so you want to make sure that when you're planning with someone, with a family, with a person, that we don't take one thing that went wrong, or even if they made two very similar mistakes, that now that's like a life sentence and it has to be included in the social history, excuse me, forever. When really the important part is to make sure that they're learning from that experience, and that it doesn't become sort of a punishment, and that, oh, now I'm in trouble, or I made that mistake and now I can't ever go anywhere on my own anymore. I'm going to take a quick drink, and if there are any questions, feel free to chime in. Okay, so the next slide. Oh, I have not been flipping my paper as fast as I've been flipping the slides. So I'm on the Achieving Outcomes for Connected Life Domains, and again, this is the life domains come out of the Charting a Life Course framework, and The explanations of each of the life domains is on the slides. They're all interrelated and connected. And the service system, we tend to focus on health and safety. And for good reason, because if you're not healthy and safe, it's really hard to achieve any other outcomes in your life. However, when you think about meeting somebody at a party or just meeting someone, well, you don't have to be at a party, anywhere. You could just be meeting someone. These are the things that people ask one another to kind of start to get to know each other. So you ask people where they work, what part of town do you live in, or what town do you live in? You look familiar. Where have I seen you around town? Is social and spirituality. So maybe we have mutual friends. Maybe I've seen you at the YMCA, or you go to my church. Healthy living. So, well, we don't typically ask people how they stay healthy, but if people have some sort of hobby that's related to that, or they, you meet someone who likes to run, or they like to lift weights, or they're an avid bicyclist or something, then that's probably going to come out. And thinking about safety and security, we're really good at safety and security and helping people think about how to make sure those things are in place. And then citizenship and advocacy is really how you think about that responsibility, the leadership, the peer support, and the roles that you have. I also want to reference the Supporting Real Lives folder. And so I believe those are probably more commonly known as the lifespan folders that are specific to South Dakota. There is a booklet inside that really includes what probably the more jargony word that I would use to describe that would be anticipatory guidance. And I know that those folders were distributed several years ago when we first developed them. We distributed those to family support coordinators, and what we know is that because they were very new, and over the last few years, we've learned a lot about charting the life course, which is the premise that those folders are really based on. We've learned a lot, and probably did not provide enough context to coordinators about what is it you do with those folders? Is it just simply information to pass out? It can be, but it's so much more meaningful if you have a good grasp of the contents inside, and can help the family and even sit down with them and help them complete some of those worksheets, or explain to them that this is one way of thinking about whatever the situation at hand might be. But that booklet lists all of these life domain areas as well as the life stage areas. And so the booklet is not meant to read from front to back. Excuse me. It's really meant to, right now I have 2 school-age children. I'm going to insert like a little sniffle in there because next week I'll have a kindergartner, and I'm a little sad about it, but it's okay. So I now have 2 school-age kids. So I'm going to focus solely on that school-age life stage, and then I'm going to look on the left-hand side of the pages, and I'm going to line that up with one of these life domain areas. So I'm going to pay attention. Let's say I'm going to pay attention to safety and security because I have a 10-year-old and he's been wondering when he can get a phone. Well, it's not anytime soon, but it is something to start thinking about. How do we, what do I need to learn about parental controls and social media, getting internet on this phone? Like, there's so many things to know just in that one little slice of life, that is very overwhelming to me. So I could look at that portion of the booklet and only focus on that. So I know that it's a very text-heavy booklet and it can be overwhelming, but as coordinators, I'm hoping that this explanation will help families narrow in on what it is they're focusing on in the moment, and only in that life stage that they're living right at that moment. Any questions or comments about that? It's a quiet group today. Okay. So I'm going to move on. These are screenshots of another couple workbooks that are in the folders, in the lifespan folders. There is a tool for developing a vision, which there's an individual version and a family version. And you'll see that these also have those life domain areas along the left side. And so the columns are titled My Vision for the Future, My Vision for My Future, and then what is my current situation? Again, these worksheets you don't have to fill out every section. But this might be a worksheet that you could sit down with a family and say, okay, maybe, or you send it to them beforehand or something to that effect, and just ask them to think about what are the things that you're dealing with right now and rank those. And that can help, again, connect to the ISP development and what is really high priority for the person versus the family, because those things do not always match up. Maybe you're supporting a young adult who's wanting to move out, but the family, that is not something that they're interested in. And so taking that information from both perspectives can really help kind of guide conversation. So it's not something that just becomes taboo and we're not going to talk about it because everybody gets upset about it, but as a way to say, okay, well, I can see you want this, and mom and dad, that is a really low priority for you. So how can we still talk about this and move forward without ignoring someone's wishes? But just as another example of something that is in those folders that can be useful to you, that can be useful to the person and the family you're supporting. So when you're thinking about writing goals, you want to find out what's important to the person about the goal, what is important for them regarding their health, safety, and what this doesn't say is a valued member of the community, and how do they get a balanced person-centered goal. I'm going to go through this really quickly. I feel like, actually, I think I'm going to skim over this because we've got about an hour left, and I'm hoping there will be some conversation or questions. This is a brief little instruction on a way that you can bring a brainstorming exercise. And it really is just a platform that you can use, a skill that you can use to get yourself or get the family or the person or team members kind of thinking outside of the box. So the next thing I'll talk about is the integrated support star. And so exploration and discovery mapping. So the different points of the star, and many of you are probably, this is not your first time seeing this either, but we have personal strengths and assets, the skills and abilities that the person has, their relationships, who's in their life, technology, what does the person have access to and know how to use, what other kinds of things might be helpful or does the person need or want to learn how to use. In the community, what are the places that person goes? And when I think about the community, one thing it doesn't say on this explanation on the slide is I consider this community portion to be places that all people go in the community, that all people have access to. So it might be the YMCA, it might be the public library, it might be city parks or like a rec league, a city parks and rec league for basketball or something. But these are things that anyone can participate in, and there might be a fee associated, but anyone who wants to pay that fee, or there's no restrictions on that. And then lastly, the eligibility specific. And so this is based on age, disability, income, or whatever other factors that can be used. And what we want to do is we want to look to all of those other areas, personal strengths and assets, relationships, technology, community, before we start. We don't want to start with eligibility specific, because I think what we've learned over the years is, again, as a human services field, we really want to be helpers. And so we say, oh, we can provide this service, and we can do this, and we can do this. And pretty soon that person's life and schedule has a lot of eligibility specific aspects to it, but because those are, the person's receiving those based on some set criteria, it tends to be more isolating from the greater community. And so we want to make sure the person that we're not isolating and creating unintentional barriers for the person to be part of the all. Okay, so we've already talked about what is important to the person, but you really, before you develop an outcome statement, you want the team to really figure out how does this relate to what's important to the person. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jays and take a deep breath and a long drink of water.
Okay, so I think kind of, tying it back into family support and our day-to-days, and, what Julie is getting at is that we're not just asking the questions that are on these tools or on these forms. So we're not just saying, well, what are your relationships? What technology do you have in your home? But that we're using all of these tools to gather information, and ultimately through conversations, now I can document what's important to this person and what's important for this person, not just sitting down with that tool in front of me and asking, okay, what's important to you and what's important for you, because we're checking a box because we know that we have to use one PCT tool on an annual basis. We really need to be doing a better job at getting creative and using different tools through the process of discovery, so that we can not only learn more about individuals and their families, but so that we can develop better plans that will support them, not just now in the moment or even in the planned year, but will support them throughout their lives. And so thinking about how is this process of discovery impacting the goals that we're writing on somebody's plan and how we are supporting them. And right now, a lot of kind of, what we're seeing is that we have this important to and important for, but then that's not really impacting what we're seeing now on an individual's plan. So we really want to focus on that. Developing person-centered goals, it's not a service goal, right? So now, if we're going to provide somebody companion care, that's great, but we're providing that companion care for a reason. This individual is trying to accomplish something through that, whether that being a valued member of their community or gaining skills. There's a reason why we're doing it. Right now, we're just seeing, well, the goal is to provide them companion care. That's not a goal, that's a service. And so we really need to kind of reframe how we are having these conversations, and how we are having, conversations with families, and then how that conversation is impacting the plan. These goals should be something that the person has control over. Sometimes we see that there are plans developed with little input from the actual participant themselves. While we realize this is family support, and families play a valued role in helping individuals accomplish their goals, those goals should still be the individuals. We can determine how we can support the family to support the individual, but we really need to do a better job at focusing on what our participants want and what their opinion is on their lives and how we can help support them to get there. And so our goals should be measurable and specific, and they're not just a solution. So a solution we kind of like to think of as a Band-Aid, right? You have an issue, I have a solution, I can purchase X, Y, and Z for you, but I'm just simply putting a Band-Aid on this because now 6 months down the road, we're in the same instance, and that same situation has come up again because our solution wasn't long-term. And so we need to better look at an individual's entire life and the supports that we can provide so that we're not just providing solutions, we're actually helping them accomplish their vision of a good life. And we should also identify that there might be obstacles in the way of achieving a goal, but we need to work on doing our best to overcome, identify those obstacles, and establish how we can overcome. So the next slide, we're continuing on talking about, what a goal should do, and it should include things that are working for a person and change things that aren't working, and help maintain the lifestyle that they've chose. and move the person towards a future that they desire. So again, talking about that companion care, where are they hoping that developing these independent living skills will take them? And these aren't conversations that should just be happening with adults. We can have these conversations, with younger kids and their families, and that's why those kind of life stages that Julie was talking about are so important, because it can help us frame questions for families while they're in that life stage. But we always need to be looking towards the future and knowing sometimes families haven't thought that far ahead, and we can take kind of small bites towards that future, but that's ultimately kind of the way that we're looking at going. And so with the next slide, where we talk about fixing and supporting, and that's kind of what I had, touched on a little bit, but not necessarily jumping on a Band-Aid in a solution, in that, the solution comes from a paid service or support that only the coordinator can, or the state can resolve, kind of putting people in that power over situation and moving into a power with situation. So how can we work together and find resources and help families, establish what they need, and do that in a together, in a supporting role versus a temporary fix, but then the next time the family's in that situation, well, now the goal didn't get approved because of that, and it puts it more towards that power over type of situation.
I think the only thing I would add is the main difference I see between power and over and power with, because I don't think any coordinator has the intention of having power over a family or the participant, so I don't want to give that impression. But I see this as the power with is empowering the person to become more self-sufficient, and so they're better able to solve those issues themselves down the road. And that whole the phrase, if you catch a fish, it feeds a person for a day, but if you teach someone to fish, then they'll never be hungry. So that's sort of what I relate this to, versus those shorter term solutions that Jay's mentioned.
So going on to the next slide and talking about finding the solution, we kind of need to talk about what obstacles might be stopping an individual from reaching their desired outcomes. So if they're struggling with finding employment or something along those lines, we're talking about, what is getting in their way, whether it's transportation or the job skills that they need to develop, and then talking about how we can overcome those obstacles by being creative with what we could do instead. So then we have a few questions about, moving on to the next slide, testing whether it's an outcome or solution. So just kind of asking, what would it give for you? What would it do for you? When, where, and with whom do you want to do it? And what would make it possible for you? And how will you know when you have got it? So thinking about those questions and how the answers to those questions could determine whether it being an outcome and we're looking more long-term, helping people be self-sufficient, or we're just simply providing a Band-Aid to a solution. So if the temporary fix is providing a goal for housing assistance, and what would it give you? Well, now they have electricity, but 3 months down the road, we're in the same situation. So then maybe we need to look at what supports we're providing to support an outcome as opposed to a solution.
And I think one of the trickier parts about writing an outcome statement, and we're going to continue to talk about this and give more examples, but is the tendency to sort of embed that solution into the outcome. And so that can, it takes practice, but like Jay said, these are just some questions that kind of help you think a little more deeply about what is the end result of the goal you're writing. Okay.
So moving on to the next slide, and the difference is really the outcome is the result that you get when you're there. That's what you want. And the goal is the aim. And so talking about interim accomplishments that help you reach the larger outcome. So thinking about if they want to go to Europe that's one of their goals. Well, they know that they need to have a passport to go to Europe. So what steps do we need to take to help them get that passport, and developing goals on those steps? And so maybe they know that passports cost money. And so really they want to get a job. They want to be able to buy a passport, not just for the so that they have that to make it on the trip, but so that they can afford the trip. And so then the goal would be to connect them with Voc Rehab to help them find a job. And so then talking about the strategies through that of how we're accomplishing those goals and making kind of smaller and specific steps. Again, opening a bank account and depositing money each week, and who is kind of helping with who and what and how often and when those kind of steps are being taken. And so we know kind of framing this in the language of focus, here we're talking about how this goal will be achieved and that those plans and steps to make you get your outcome. So moving on to the next slide, kind of talking about writing goals as outcome statements. So we begin with the aim of the outcome and using the person's name followed by an action verb, and so helping put it again back into the concept of the participant, the frame of mind of the participant and what they're trying to accomplish, and completing with how it will make a difference. So we talked about using terms like so that or in order to, and so to kind of start, we would start with that Jacob lives in Johnsonburg, Cynthia walks in her neighborhood, Suzanne works at Pizza Hut, and then we would work on kind of continuing by adding either as an example so that or in order to kind of complete those goals as outcome statements. And so on the next slide, some examples of goals as outcome statements would be that Jacob lives in Johannesburg so that he can see his family every week. Or Cynthia walks in her neighborhood in order to stay connected to her neighbors and stay active. And Suzanne works at Pizza Hut so that she can make money to increase her independence and do the things that she loves to do. So these are just some examples that we've provided.
So is this making sense? I do want to pause and just maybe have a little confirmation that, because the idea of an outcome statement versus writing a goal is sometimes a little bit hard to get around. And so I just, either in the chat box or if a couple people want to unmute and just provide a little bit of feedback on kind of what are you thinking in this moment. And I'm getting more and more comfortable with awkward silences, so FYI.
Hey, Julie, this is Terry Bukowski.
Excellent. Hi, Terry.
Julie. Hey, so I think what you guys are talking about really makes sense. So typically when we have families that are looking for, specific things, for example, like swimming lessons to strengthen their son or daughter's swimming skills, because it's a danger for them to be around water, and we know that they love the water. So the outcome essentially we're looking at is, Jacob will be safe around water, versus us writing a goal of family support will pay for swimming lessons for Jacob. Is that how you guys are looking at this?
100%, yes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something I think about for my own family is our family can enjoy time at the beach because my kids. So, or you could even maybe phrase that, Jacob takes swimming lessons so that his family can enjoy time at the beach. I think that would probably even.
Right.
But I think, he's safe around water. I think that's a really good example. Thanks.
Right. And so it's targeting everything back to what, creates the good life plan, for lack of better words, for families and or that's participants is, why we're involved, and just giving them the opportunity to pursue those good life plans. So that's just tailoring it down to the goal statements, which again, there's an outcome versus not necessarily what family support is going to do for the person, because we all know that's why we're involved, but more so what the families what we're helping the family achieve. So I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Great, thank you. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? Okay, good.
I do want to make a quick announcement in that there has been a lot of construction going on at our building here, and if you hear any crazy noises in the background, we apologize, but they seem to be moving in our direction, so it might start to get a little loud in the background, so we do apologize for that. So, moving on, and thank you again, Terry, for that, and kind of framing that in terms of, you know, how you're looking at plans and writing plans. That was a great example. And so talking about kind of traditional services and programs versus quality of life outcomes. And so historically, you know, we would more so focus on the day-to-day and the now as opposed to what is actually important to a person. And so we can talk about Judy and that, you know, she would take a shower with guidance 6 out of 7 days of the week by December 1st. But that, I mean, those are taking a shower, right? It's a an activity of daily living that ultimately we think about we all hopefully take showers. And so we need to really look at what is important to Judy. And so what's important to Judy is that she likes to look nice when she goes to school so that other kids talk to her and invite her to join them at lunch. So kind of reframing why we're trying to get. So if we're providing a personal care service, obviously we know that the individual has activities of daily living that they might need assistance with performing. But why are those activities of daily living important to and important for that individual?
Yeah, I think NJ's just hit on, you know, what is that connection between important to and important for? Because you might be supporting someone who really, really does not want to brush their teeth or take that shower. But if it relates to, okay, your friends probably aren't going to want to hang out if you have bad breath or you're like, you know, the smelly person. So that can create that that motivation. I think there's another, oops, too fast.
So then just another example talking about, you know, Faye will exercise 3 times a week with verbal prompts for 6 consecutive months. And this is kind of what we might see again under as like a recreational goal, but it would be that Faye practices for karate so that she earns an orange belt and she stays fit. You can even add that, you know, through karate, she gains connections with her peers and she makes, you know, friends. And that's why karate is important to her. Mm-hmm. Not just because it's, you know, a way of exercise and that's what she needs to do for her health, being important for her, but hopefully, you know, there's some connections that's made during the time that she's at karate, and it gives her, you know, a sense of kind of ownership on something that she does, and she feels valued while she's there. And just another example, we'll talk about how Anna will participate in one social recreation outing a week with staff supervision, and instead reframing that towards Anna participates in City Garden Club in her town and is an active member this year so that she's not bored and meets new friends.
And so you'll notice that each of these are very specific in, you know, what the person wants to do. And I think the first time I saw this training, what really struck me was the one with Faye and the karate, because as a direct support professional way back, you know, there were a lot of goals to help someone exercise, and it seemed like we were always walking with everyone. We were always taking walks. But there were a lot of people or times that somebody didn't want to go on a walk. And I really wish that I'd had in my toolbox at that time, the skills and experience to say, okay, well, they don't want to walk, but maybe do you want to go swimming, or do you want to go ride a bike, or, you know, just to offer those options and think a little more deeply about why the person might not want to do what you're asking them to do. Okay, is this me? Back to me? Okay, so I have a couple examples of the trajectory. So this is Timothy, and this is based on just a conversation. And again, this was not filled out during the conversation with Timothy, but through information, just sitting down and talking, and maybe making a couple notes, but mostly just paying attention to what he was saying and then coming back and writing this stuff down later. So that's probably pretty hard for you to read. So I'm just going to hit some highlights, and it's hard for me to read because it's also tiny on my screen. So what I want, so vision for a good life, to feel wanted and to belong within family, at school, with my friends, to be safe on the internet or going, moving around town, to get along with stepdad and not fight, to have a better relationship with his mom, his brother, and his sister, having friends, a girlfriend, learning more about computers. What he doesn't want, to feel like he doesn't belong. I mean, that's probably pretty universal. To be treated differently from his siblings, to have no one to talk to or hang out with, to stay home all the time. This says maid, but it's really everyone mad at me all the time. Or to be nagged about the things he needs to do better, or the things he got wrong or made mistakes with. Some of the supports, some of the things that might help lead Timothy towards that life that he wants is a visual schedule, whether it's on a phone or on the wall, having a physical outlet, things that are scheduled that he can look forward to. So he's getting out of the house and he can say, oh, well, maybe I'm staying home today, but I know that, on Friday, I have this fun thing planned. A plan to stay safe on the internet at home, maybe, taking some classes at the community college or something would help with that. Getting connected to self-advocacy groups, someone to talk to, maybe counseling. Some of the things getting in the way and leading him potentially towards a life he does not want is a lack of consistency and discipline and consequences. So really not knowing, having clear expectations about what's okay to do and what's not, and getting mixed messages. And not because of being home all the time, not having a lot of opportunities to build or practice those skills that he needs to be successful in other places. Then we have the integrated support star for Tim. And so you'll notice that the one I showed earlier is around, it just has one section. Oh, we have the wrong name. That's okay. So we have, each of the sections are divided into current and future. And so this is just another format of the integrated support star to identify what he already has and what you could maybe explore in the future. And so currently, personal strengths and assets, he's funny, he loves sports, he likes to read, he's a very caring person. In the future, so, to speak to connecting to some of those physical activities that were mentioned on the trajectory, he's interested in lifting weights. Are there other hobbies or clubs related to, he could be a computer hobby person. I don't know about computers very much, so I can't even tell you what hobbies there might be out there, other than like gaming. I don't know. All I know is what my kids teach me about gaming. Okay, so relationships. So he's got people in his life. He's got his immediate family, his mom, his stepdad, sister, brother. He's got a best friend, but his best friend recently moved away. He's got like a youth group leader, and there's some other guys that he's met through that youth group. But in the future, he would like a girlfriend. Can he make more friends through that youth group? How can he maintain the friendships long distance with his best friend? And okay, so then moving over to technology, he uses an alarm clock. He's got a camera. There's a camera and a couple cameras are in the home to their security and safety cameras. He's interested in computer programming and video games, but in the future, is there a possibility that he could be home alone with using FaceTime to check in periodically with his mom and stepdad? Covenant Eyes is a software that tracks online activity if they're worried about his safety, and whether or not he's going to sites that are not okay. Related to the counseling piece on the Trajectory, Headspace is like a meditation app, and there are lots of those out there. That's just one available. A smartphone reminders, step-by-step apps. There are tons of workout plans on Pinterest, so lots of technology possibilities. And then currently he's in the boys club. He goes to skate park. There we go. But in the future, what kinds of Parks and Rec sports leagues are there that he could get involved in? A lot of gyms have like an orientation that they can walk you through how to use all the equipment, and they'll even give you a workout plan. Is that a possibility? Is there like some sort of gaming club? Again, I don't know. So it's got a question mark. I don't know what those things are. The library to check out books. He likes to read. And then finally we get to that eligibility and, using Family Support 360, special education, Special Olympics. And then in the future, what kind of social skills classes, what kind of healthy relationships classes, are there scholarships or special passes to like the rec center? Is there some sort of peer-to-peer mentoring or voc rehab as an option to learn how to be more independent and get a job as a young teen? So one example, and then we also have a trajectory for his family. And just to show you that the trajectory doesn't only have to go into ISP planning. Just you don't have to only do a trajectory for the person because the ISP is for the person. In doing this, you can learn a lot about, again, the family needs. And so there are some examples here where Tim's parents really want to be a couple. They don't get much time to get out by themselves. They also want to do fun things as a whole family, but that time to be a married couple and to build their skills as parents away from the kids is important. They don't want to lose their home. They don't want to have financial instability. But they're full-time working parents, and so how do you squeeze in a lot of support to Tim and his siblings in just a few hours in the evenings and on weekends? And so that's a struggle. So to tie this to the different kinds of support, so 3 types of support. So discovery and navigation, so thinking about what kinds of knowledge and skills do Tim and or his family members need. Excuse me. Connecting and networking. How can they get connected to other people with similar experiences that they can talk to, problem solve with, who could mentor them, or just get out of the house in general. And then there's the goods and services, which is that instrumental support. So those are the more goods and services that Jay's mentioned earlier. And the lists here aren't necessarily South Dakota specific, but just kind of a general list. So connecting to that, in this situation, some ideas would be just within the service coordination service of the ISP, researching some family therapy, some in-home family therapists, researching some healthy relationship classes, some communication courses, looking into what support groups or disability networks are in their community or surrounding communities. And then you can also think about respite care is going to provide that break for mom and dad, putting like a safety plan together for that internet, the community access, and possibly checking into economic assistance because they're having some financial issues, which is not a family support specific function, but it certainly is eligibility specific. So, all right. I think it's your turn again. Okay.
Yes. Okay, and so then of course when we're talking about person-centered thinking and planning and writing the goals, we have to think about the language that we use when we're doing that to develop plans. Okay, sorry, I do not have controls. So next slide.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Okay, so talking about language to avoid, client or consumer, I think we're pretty good at referring to them as, individuals or participants. That's our common language. But with the second bullet of kind of my consumer, my person, my group, a lot of times if I get a call from a family, they have concerns with the terminology like my program or my budget. And so kind of being conscious of that language and using those phrases when we're having conversations with family and talking about things like let or allow and will, or how we're talking about or talking with people. I don't think a lot of kind of when we're talking about transported or I bathe or I dress, that's more of a language within direct supports. But also then avoiding things like functioning level or refused or non-compliant, toileting or toileted, socialize or outings, as this language can demonstrate kind of power over versus power with people. And so being cognizant of those things.
And I often relate some of those terms to how I talk about my own life. And that's just, some of those terms are just not, like, I guess what I would call normalized language. I don't typically talk about going out and socializing with my friends. I talk about just going out with friends.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an easy way to reframe it.
And then just talking with the next slide about kind of alternatives to jargon, interpersonal skills, ambulates independently, verbal cues or prompts, auditory monitoring distance, off-task behavior, on-task behavior, and community mobility. Those are obviously, again, when we talk about kind of disability-specific terms that we don't generally use. And so thinking in the framework of more of kind of casual conversations and things like easy to get along with. We even asked with the second bullet, talking about walking on their own. Do we even need to say this? Talking about different things within earshot, distractions, pays attention, the pedestrian skills, using those as alternatives to kind of some of the very disability-specific language that we use.
Did I go too far? Okay. Okay. So again, when we think about some of the more antiquated language as it relates to the jargon, and we often speak in a language that is completely foreign to families. Even when we have new people in our office, often the acronyms we use or the words we use, it's very foreign, and so, but it's a really hard habit to break. So recognizing that, and that no one is, intentionally trying to use language that is, demeaning or degrading or makes families feel excluded. That certainly there is that effect sometimes, and so we have to just be really cognizant of that. And so applying that to the language we use when we're actually writing that goal. We have learning social skills, increases physical activity, personal hygiene. I don't talk about my own I don't talk about my hygiene specifically. I don't talk about my vocational skills or improving my social skills. So there are a couple of examples. So the vocational skills will increase productivity. Increasing productivity. I would like to increase my productivity, but I don't usually think about myself in that way. I just think, well, I need to get more done. Just putting together a photo album is something really concrete that also helps increase those fine motor skills. So just some examples of some of the older language versus being a bit more specific and outcome driven. So we have this little practice scenario. So I know you can all see it on the slide, but I'm just going to say it out loud as well. So in this example, Cindy is a 34-year-old who likes to cook, bake, decorate cakes, celebrate special occasions. She's very thoughtful. She always remembers her friends and family members' birthdays and any other special occasions. And she loves to choose special gifts. Having income is important to Cindy. She has a knack for remembering names, and she always has a smile to share. It's important for Cindy to have support with her budget and keep her apartment neat and clean. And so because she likes to buy all those gifts, sometimes she gets a little in the red zone and, isn't able to pay all her bills on time. So her old goals would be, I want to increase my work productivity by, this is quite an outdated date, but let's just pretend that says 20. Let's pretend that says 6/1 of 20. Or I would like to learn more skills to keep my apartment clean and accept redirection to redo cleaning tasks in my home by 6/1 of 2020. So this is where we're going to open it up for another moment and ask what ideas you might all have for, and if you got the PDF, don't tell because you see the new goal slides. But any ideas you have for how the goals could be reframed into more of an outcome statement and connect better with what's important to Cindy. And you don't have to say it exactly as an outcome statement because I realize we're learning today, so it's not a test, but even ideas that you have for what a goal would be. Oh, we have got a comment. Okay, so Kate says a lot of this is something I would add to companion care agreement, but do we need to get this specific in a companion care goal in our actual plans? It seems much more like what my son gets from his CSP. And Kate, I think I'm just going to ask, do you mean this example specifically or the presentation so far overall? Just so I can better answer the question. Okay, so we will be giving some family support specific examples, but I do want to point out that a 34-year-old could certainly get family support services. Like, this is not necessarily choices specific. So again, if that's more related to some of the examples I provided earlier, I apologize, but Jay's will be providing more family support specific here in a moment. Okay. Oh, Kate said that audio is not working. Okay.
Okay, so I could see how if you guys are getting hung up on the old goals, the examples that are listed under the old goals as being specific to a CSP. I think we get that. I believe what Julie is asking with the scenario, Cindy being a 34-year-old who likes to cook, bake, and decorate, could very well be on family support. So what could be maybe a companion care goal for Cindy,
or supported employment,
or a supported employment goal for Cindy on family support?
What would what as you read this scenario, what are the outcomes you think Cindy might want to accomplish? So again, thinking about why we're writing the goal. What does she want to accomplish? What are some of the outcomes that Cindy might want in her life? What does her good life look like? So I'm going to advance. Oh, go ahead. Somebody? No, or they just hung up maybe. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to advance. So hopefully Terry responded. Oh, okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, so Terry said Cindy could be supported to find employment in the field of cooking and or baking. So I advanced the slide, so hopefully, okay, it's trying to rejoin here. So a couple possibilities for Nicole would be that she wants to host parties for friends and family throughout the year at her home. So again, that's the outcome. She wants to explore employment opportunities throughout the year, especially in being a greeter or working at a bakery. So in those situations, so if she wants to host party for friends and families throughout the year at her home, she probably, again, she's still getting the support to keep her apartment clean, but that might be provided through the companion care service, correct? Okay, she needs help in budgeting. If she's going to host parties, if you're going to buy party supplies or gifts for your friends, you need some budgeting skills, which would also be companion care. She wants to explore employment opportunities. That would be supported employment. But these are the outcomes. That should probably say the new outcome. So now that you can see the example of what that translates to for the outcomes, is that helpful? And hopefully seems less choices specific.
And I think when we get into some of the examples later on, maybe it'll help put it into perspective what we're getting at. So we'll go to the next slide. Thank you, Terry. So talking about how this goal will be achieved question. So what do we want to maintain, or what do we need to change? What do we need to learn, or what do we want to learn next? So those could be some questions that we're answering within that how this goal will be achieved section of focus. So we'll go on to the next slide, and we're talking about companion care with Jacob. And again, this is just a kind of very vague example, seeing as Jacob is not, in our minds, a real person. So I'm hoping that knowing more about an individual, that you could elaborate more within these goals. But typically what we would see currently in the system is that the goal would be Jacob will access companion care. Well, that's not a goal, that's a service. So what we're focusing on here is that Jacob would like to live in his own apartment with roommates after he finishes high school. And Jacob has identified that he wants to live near Sioux Falls so that he can remain close to his family and friends. So how this goal will be achieved is where we will then focus on the service. And so companion care, Jacob will work with his companion care provider to develop the skills that he will need to be able to live independently. Jacob's identified provider will work with him on cooking safety, developing a schedule to keep him on track of his chores, and money management. Jacob and his provider will explore apartments in the area. They will also work on identifying relationships that could lead to potentially being his roommate in the future. So again, we're looking bigger picture, and we're helping Jacob move forward with his vision of a good life. So we're not just saying that the goal is to provide Jacob companion care. How that will be achieved, Jacob will receive companion care. That we're focusing instead on where Jacob wants to go and how companion care as a service will support him to get there. So I hope that this example helps to put it into better context within family support and within the focus system about how we're hoping that we can change the way that goals look versus how they currently are being entered. And so we'll go on to the next goal with being a respite care example. So kind of focusing on the same thing. So the service that's being provided is respite care, and the goal is not that Joey will have respite care, but the goal in kind of again talking about supporting families is that Joey's mom and dad would like to remain connected as a strong family unit and best support Joey's needs. And how that goal will be accomplished is through providing respite care so that Joey's mom and dad can have a date night once a month. The respite care provider will be trained on how to provide care to Joey so that his parents can have peace of mind while they were out of the home. So if there's any questions about that, feedback. again, these aren't concrete examples, and it's just kind of a change, and I'm not saying that this is not how all goals are written within the focus, but the majority of goals that are written within focus are very service specific and providing a service need. Basically, we're not looking at that individual's vision of a good life and how the service is being provided is helping support their goals. So we'll go to the next slide. And so again, kind of in that how the goal will be achieved section, we're talking about describing the outcomes of what will be done through specific steps and who will be doing it and who is responsible. And kind of when it will be completed within the time frame. So if it's more of a one-time type purchase thing, then that would be, a more direct service, but we would still want to describe, if we're talking about a SMAES item, how that item is going to support them in their vision of a good life, although we realize it might just be purchased one time, or if it's a companion care type service, we realize that's being provided across the span of their approved plan. And so you can also include kind of frequency and duration information there in terms of how many hours a week or what they might be accessing.
So this is our last slide, and we're hoping, and I appreciate the comments that have been made in the chat pod or over audio so far. But, some ideas on what you could try or what you might try differently based on what you heard today, what makes a lot of sense, what maybe are you struggling with. And again, this is intended, so the use of person-centered thinking and charting the life course is not intended to be layered on top of all the things you already do to prepare for an ISP or to write an ISP or to meet with a family, but to find opportunities in the events that you are already doing to integrate person-centered thinking tools and skills and charting the life course concepts into what those conversations you're already having, because you're going out there and you're meeting people and you're talking with them about what's going well and what's not going well for them, but thinking about it through the lens of person-centered thinking or charting the life course should become part of what you do versus being really overwhelming and as a layer on top of. And that takes some practice, and it is overwhelming for a little while, but we want to kind of hear your questions and, like I said, what makes sense and what questions do you have? What are you struggling to figure out how you would make it work?
Well, Julie and Jay, this is Terry. Would you guys expect that we just, as plans are just renewed as we're going forward now, that we just adjust those plans with more person-centered language versus going in and adjusting plans within a certain time frame? Is that okay if we just do that as we come across annual plans now?
Yeah, and that was a point that I was going to add in talking about kind of not just our expectations here at the division, but the expectations within the HCBS settings rule of requiring person-centered planning for all of the participants on our program. This is an expectation that we will be developing goals for families, and so and helping individuals accomplish that vision of a good life and be documenting those goals in an individual service plan. And so absolutely, it's not necessarily something that we're expecting that all 1,400 plans are going to be updated. But moving forward, the expectation is that we as a system will move into compliance with, providing person-centered plans for the individuals on our program.
Okay, thank you.
It looks like there's a comment from Martha. Marcia, I believe the intent is to send a copy of the PowerPoint out to everyone. Is that
Yes.
accurate? Yeah. So that'll be coming. Yep.
I did just send it.
Oh, perfect. Kara is on it. Okay, other thoughts or questions?
This is Tiffany. I'm actually running into issues with, I do support those 34-year-old to, the whole age really on my program. And I've been doing it for 10 years, and some of my people, when I ask them, like, are you living your best life? Is there, how, whatever, the conversation, they're independent, they're working, they're driving, they have friends, they're healthy, they're out in the community. I run into, they are succeeding, so I don't know what else I can do.
So, and this is Julie, and I'm just going to ask the question because I have the luxury and the challenge of not being as up to my eyeballs in family support as Jay's and Kara. But so what services might be in, if there's a specific person, and you certainly don't name a name, but what services would be outlined in their ISP today?
Well, I know how I can change it instead of like, he's got a job and we provide supported employment for him. So I know how I can change it to be more person-centered. Like, he's working because he likes this job. He's been doing it forever. This is how he makes his living. This is what he wants. But on top of that, trying to find a new goal or a new something every year to improve this young man's life, he's happy. He's succeeding. And, we talk about every year about, well, maybe we can lose some weight. Well, you know what? Every year I could lose some weight. And I don't, because we don't. We say that we're going to do stuff and we don't. I mean, that's just human beings.
Yeah.
So he's succeeding. I don't hear from him very often because he's succeeding. He's successful. He's happy.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we had talked about in the previous slides was what do we need to do to maintain. So it's not always about new goals and services, but if he has supported employment on his plan and that's helping him maintain his job that he loves, how, I think you kind of touched on that, how are we writing those goals and kind of framing those goals? And that's really the focus that we want to bring to this, because we know, through these conversations, you might identify something that's not even a service that family support provides, but how can you help them in that area? And if it's not a new goal, but you want to maintain the fact that he really loves his life, then identifying that within the existing services that he has on his plan.
Right, and I think one thing I would add to that, Tiffany, would be that the important thing is that you continue to check in, because people change, and one day you might ask him and he might say, you know what, I got a new supervisor and he's a jerk, and now I'm ready to start looking for a new job. Or, something has changed. And so the important thing is to just keep checking. But if he's happy, you don't have to keep just making up stuff for the sake of making it up, because that's not helping anybody have a better.
But we're supposed to do a person's, I've run out of, I don't know what to do for him. Our plan's succeeding. I ask him every year, but you're not going to see anything on, I don't know. I'm at a loss because my people are in that, grown up stage, which is a really long stage of life, and you kind of just get compliant in that stage of life. And they're happy with how their lives look, and they're not being controlled by anything because they're living independently on their own, succeeding that way.
So what I would suggest, Tiffany, in this particular situation, in that booklet within those lifespan folders. So, if I would just suggest, if you have, when you have a minute, and if you're supporting a lot of those adults, because adulthood is a long stage of life, and you're absolutely right, and probably a lot of people myself included on the call, are kind of in that like, I'm kind of coasting and things are good and I don't want to change anything in a huge way. But looking through those booklets and comparing that adulthood life stage with the different life domains might just trigger some ideas for you as a different way to check in with people. And that ranking sheet, that like developing a vision sheet for the individual, just to kind of say, okay, if your vision of a good life exactly matches your current situation, we're good and we're maintaining. But if there are differences on that, okay, what is something small you could do? And again, like Jay said, it doesn't have to be a family support service. Maybe you're connecting him to, researching something for him and giving him a resource. And whether or not he does it, that's on him, Is that
Okay.
at all?
Yeah, I just, I used to feel really connected to my people, and I did a lot of stuff for my people, and then, we were told we can't do that anymore. And so we're supposed to feel connected to them and build these positive relationships when now it's in the hands of someone else. I have to hire someone to do that, and I just feel disconnected from them.
So I understand that with the change of the service coordinator procedures, but then I think even within that conversation, that has identified that if that individual has that level of need, then they need a companion care provider, and that companion care provider would be providing those level of supports, which would be a goal that could be person-centered, should be person-centered on the individual's plan. And so it's a different kind of way of not just thinking, but operating from how family support has historically operated. And so we realize that, it's a big change. We're not necessarily expecting that after this presentation, all the light bulbs have gone off and everything is solved, but we hope to continue to take steps of not just bringing this program into compliance, but doing our best to help people reach their vision of a good life and maintain.
Any other questions or comments from others while we have just a couple minutes left?
Okay, well, I want to thank you all for joining us today and thank those who provided feedback. We will be sending out the copy of the presentation, and then we also have the PowerPoint, as mentioned, that was recorded and will be shared with in the resources tab of our website. So thank you all for joining us today, and if you have any questions.
I'm going to give one last plug before everybody starts hanging up. Stop. For the South Dakota Gathering, registration is open, which is it's planned for September 10th and 11th. So that would be another really good opportunity. You can register as a team. I know that several coordinators attended last year with people they support and family members and those family members, and really were able to focus in on that person for that day and a half. And families that was really meaningful for them. And I think the coordinators who attended enjoyed that focused time as well. So just kind of putting a little plug in that registration is still open until next Friday. And that's one way that you could attend and register. Okay, that's all I had. Now we can say goodbye.
Thanks everyone.